Hey guys, I am Pixel Dan, and today we're going to be checking out the newest wave of retro-inspired Masters of the Universe action figures from Super7. So it's a brand new wave of Filmation-inspired 5.5-inch action figures done in that classic Masters of the Universe style, and this particular wave gives us Trapjaw, Merman, Prince Adam, and Orko. Of course, one of the things that's so cool about these figures, the thing that I really love, is the fact that they come in this very cool vintage styled packaging. Very similar to what we saw in the original Mattel lineup with the red bursting rocks there, the classic Masters of the Universe logo, but they've got this new little yellow blurb saying as seen on TV, which is our indicator that they're based on the Filmation cartoon series. And you'll also notice that in place of a mini comic back there, we do have a cool little postcard, which I'll show you when we pull that out, but it does look really nice behind all the figures because it's very similar to the old mini comics that were in the vintage toy line. So it kind of completes that overall look of the packaging. Card backs are nice and sturdy. If you haven't had these yet, I'm really impressed with these card backs. I just think they look so super nice. So you'll notice that the back of all of the figures have some brand new artwork, which is really fantastic and definitely kind of pays homage to that Errol McCarthy stuff from the vintage toy line there. But you can see it's all brand new artwork. I love the Orko one here. Look, with the eggs on Man-at-Arms, just has that very classic Filmation vibe. Look, Prince Adam and Teela and everybody are laughing. It's fantastic. Lazy Prince Adam's up here fishing with Teela yelling at him. And then we got Teela and He-Man fighting Merman, and Teela and He-Man fighting Trapjaw. Look, Teela's sword's broken. Really good stuff. And then, of course, they even kind of mimic the old action feature call-outs on there, letting you know, like with Merman and Prince Adam, you can twist the waist for the power punch. It looks like Orko's got a magic burst and he can be pushed on smooth surfaces. That's going to be interesting to check out. And of course with Trapjaw, he's got the interchangeable arm attachments, just like the vintage toy, and the opening and closing jaw. And some really nice artwork here that's a cross-sell. Again, really paying homage to that vintage toy line. So packaging is beautiful on these. This is one of those lines that I could always totally understand if somebody wants to keep carded because they look so nice. But for the sake of this video, of course, we are gonna rip all of these open and get a closer look at the figures within. All right, so I want to go ahead and start by taking a look at those little postcards that I mentioned that are in there. I've shown these in the past couple videos. I still really think these are a great inclusion in there. So they feature some brand new artwork. We've got Orko, Trapjaw, and Merman by Emiliano Santalucia, and we got a Prince Adam by Eamon O'Donoghue there. Really cool, very bright, colorful card backs. But what I also love is what's on the back. They got these great From Toy to Toon little bio things here, which basically shows the evolution of the character from the original toy, the concept art, and then the final look of the character from the Filmation series. So you can kind of see the way like the original sketch there for Trapjaw looked a lot more like the vintage toy before they shortened his arm, gave him the more magenta colors for the cartoon. Same with Merman. You can see they had a lot more details before the final designs. And the Prince Adam one is really interesting because this initial design was based a lot on how he appeared in those mini comics there with the blue tunic and everything before finally getting his pink vest that we saw in the animated series. So really cool stuff. And I think these are just a really nice inclusion in place of new mini comics. All right, so why don't we kick things off by taking a look at Trapjaw here. This is really great, and this is another one of those things like many of the Filmation Super 7 figures. At first glance, it almost looks identical to the vintage figure. It's one of those things where you look at it and it's clearly Trapjaw. But we'll get to comparison time later so I can show you the real differences between them. But I will say I love the colors on this guy. He's bright and colorful. He looks really good. The glossy plastic that we've seen on these figures is definitely still in play, mostly in the torso. I don't feel like the legs are near as glossy. They look very much more matte finished. Even the head's got more of a matte to it, especially on the face there, but the torso's got that very glossy plastic, and I know some folks don't really like that really glossy look to it. I will say the figure feels super solid. He feels great. In fact, the legs on this one are real tight. This is something I feel like Super 7's definitely gotten better at as these have gone on. Unfortunately, the first set of these had those very loose, wobbly legs where some of them were breaking. They've got got these new these hinge joints there instead of like the rubber bands from the vintage line, and they do work really good on this. You can see Trapjaw's legs go outwards, forwards, backwards a little bit. They kind of swivel, but they're nice and tight. They feel real sturdy. You can see I'm really bending and flexing these around. They don't feel like they're gonna break or anything like that. So, and he stands up nice and solid, so I don't have to worry about him falling over or anything like that. So really nice legs on this guy. We've also got the opening and closing jaw, which of course you have to with Trapjaw. Interesting to note, they still included the little hook on his head there, you know, for the cool little zip line that we had from the vintage toy. The arm looks just like what we got on the vintage toy pretty much, except it's in this red magenta color there. It's not short and stubby like it was in the vintage cartoon series, in the Filmation cartoon series. It's much more akin to what we saw with the vintage toy line. And he even comes with the exact same attachments. So we've got the little claw, which you can attach there. You can see it's real nice and tight, goes in there really good. You've got the hook, so you can attach that if you want to. Or we've got the blaster. Just like that. So you can attach all those. Again, he really does feel just like the vintage Trapjaw figure. One thing that's really interesting about these, I noticed, is they do still include the little hooks on the weapons, but he does not have the place to hang them on the belt because he didn't have that in the cartoon series. So it's really interesting that we still have the hooks on there because these are essentially the same as like the vintage toy line, but we don't have anywhere to store them on the actual figure. So other than that, I do like this guy. I think he looks really great. Let's move on to Orko, because he's definitely the most unique in this particular batch here. So if I bring in the tape measure, you can see he's just a smidge over 3 inches tall. He actually feels smaller than the vintage toy, which is probably a little more accurate because he is supposed to be short. Of course, Orko is supposed to be kind of floating in the air, if you remember from the original series, but the way Super7 handled this is they actually just put little wheels on the bottom of him, which is really interesting. It's not a pullback or anything like that. It's just wheels, so he can roll around on the ground. I don't know. I don't really get that. I think this would have been better if he had a flight stand so that we can actually make him hovering in the air. I get that we're going for vintage stuff and vintage gimmicks, but I don't know. I could have done without the wheels on this. He doesn't need wheels. I guess this was their way to make him look like he's hovering. I would have preferred to have like a little flight stand of sorts, very similar to what we got with Classics, just so we can make him look like he's the right height with the other characters. So that's my opinion on that. The hat is not removable on this version like it was on the vintage toy, but the colors are correct with the brighter red color for the hat and the more maroon color for the tunic that he's wearing, just like in the show. He does also look much more Filmation accurate with the head and everything there, so that's really nice. Other than his head turning left and right, we can just move his hands up and down. And of course, since there's not a whole lot else going on with this guy, he actually does come with a few cool accessories. So let me show you those. We've actually got 2 different wands, and I would assume, you know, very Filmation specific type weapons there. So you can place the little wands in his hands, which is really cool. Just like that. Well, you know what? Let's see. This hand is not wanting to hold on to that wand very good. That is really interesting. Okay, so that's not fitting in the hand very good. It's weird because I fit it in there right before there. So this works better. You gotta really kind of squeeze it in the fingers there. There you go. So we got that wand in there. Let me try this again. Yep, it's just not, he's just not holding on to that. Unfortunately, it seems like after I did it the first time, it stretched the hand out, and he's not really holding on to the wand there. That's unfortunate. The other thing he comes with is this magical effect. You can see it's like this pearlized, like shiny gold with little stars on there. It's got an imprint of his open hand, so you actually just place it on his hand like that, and it looks like he's kind of casting magic. That's a really fun little accessory. I like that. That's pretty cool. Here, we can put this little wand thing in his hand. Since he holds on to that one, well, he's not even holding on to that one very good. There we go. So that one definitely fits better than this one. This one's not fitting too well. The other accessory is really neat. It's a black flower. And of course, if you're a longtime Filmation fan, that's a nice little nod to Count Marzo. That's a little fun little accessory as well. I like getting the Filmation kind of accessories like this, just various artifacts from the cartoon. I think that's a really nice touch. That's gonna bring us over here to Prince Adam. For the most part, this guy feels really great. Arms and head are very tight. I will say the legs are a little looser on him than they are with my Trapjaw. They still feel okay though. They don't feel like they're gonna break or anything like that. You can see he stands solid, so that's really nice. This guy is just a repaint of He-Man, just like with the vintage toy line. And they gave him the new vest, and it is a brighter pink this time instead of the maroon on the vintage toy. It feels a lot like the material used on the vintage toy. They even gave him the same kind of belt. So they treated this Prince Adam the exact same way Mattel did Prince Adam in the past, where they just repainted their He-Man figure and put this little cloth accessory on him. In fact, he even comes with the newer Filmation style power sword that we've seen with the 5.5s from Super7, but they made it that magenta color. And this is another case where I'm gonna be a little nitpicky, because I feel like if this is a Filmation inspired Adam, that sword should have been gray. It should have been the same color as He-Man's sword. I get what they're going for. They're giving it the vintage charm of giving him the maroon sword like the vintage toy, but these are supposed to be inspired by Filmation, so I would have liked us to see this be gray, just to match up with the He-Man colors like in the cartoon. But otherwise, he's still really nice looking. There's really not a whole lot else to say about Adam here. All right, Merman is another really exciting one, and along with Trapjaw, he is the standout from this particular set. He really stands out, of course, because Merman had so many different looks in that vintage era. His original toy had a different head than the artwork depicted on the packaging, which also had a different head from the way the character looked in the cartoon. So he had 3 distinct looks back then, which is really, really crazy. So it's really cool getting the vintage 5.5 style Merman, but with that head sculpt that matches what we saw in Filmation. I think it looks fantastic. Plus, he's much more of that blue color rather than the greenish color, and just looks really nice. So same thing with him. The high gloss definitely seems to be on the torso and the arms, but the armor and the gloves and everything is more flat based. I think he looks really good. He's got really sturdy, tight joints at the legs, very much like Trapjaw. So you can see I can bend them and flex them around. They don't feel like they're gonna break. He stands nice and solid. Looks really great. He comes with his little corn on the cob sword, just like the vintage toy. I know it's not really corn on the cob, but I've always thought it looked like that, and I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. And then he also comes with the spear with the crimson pearl on it, which is actually referenced right there on his packaging, which is really cool. So we can have him hold on to that spear as well. His other hand, his left hand over here, is a little bit more open. So if you want him to get a hold on both accessories, you kind of have to do that thing like on the vintage toys where the little hilt, the handle piece comes over his fingers. But yeah, I actually really like this Merman figure. I think he looks great. All right, guys, it's comparison time. Let's go ahead and start with Prince Adam. We've got the vintage figure from Mattel standing alongside this new Filmation version from Super7. You can see the difference in the color, specifically on the vest and the hair. They gave him the lighter blonde hair on the new version, but the colors on the pants and the boots and everything almost look identical, and you can see that even the cut of the vest and everything is very similar between the two figures. Next up, we've got Orko. So you can see vintage figure Orko here standing alongside the new one. This is a kind of an interesting case, of course, because Orko was created by Filmation, so he was brought into the vintage line after he was introduced in the cartoon. So technically, this was also like a Filmation-inspired toy, but you know, the new one does look a little bit more accurate as far as his overall scaling and styling goes. You know, the original one had the weird little spinny thing. The new one's got the wheels, but you can see he's also a little bit shorter than that vintage one, which again is more appropriate for the character. Trapjaw is really interesting because look how much bigger the new one is than the original one. I did not realize the size difference until I put these two side by side. So there is quite a bit of difference here between these two figures. Look at the difference in the head sculpts. That's crazy. Really, really interesting stuff. So of course, vintage Trapjaw had the more detail on the belt, and he had the little spot where you could hang his accessories by the little hooks there. And it doesn't look like the accessories are exactly the same. You can see it's slightly different on the shape of the claw, like the new one is much thinner. than the vintage one, so they didn't use identical weapons like I thought maybe was going on when I initially opened him up. So like here, we'll look at the blasters. Well, those look very similar, but again, they are slightly different. You can see that it's just inspired by the original, but is definitely not the same. As a look at those, you can see the new hook is actually much thicker than the original one there, so that is really interesting stuff looking at these guys side by side. Now, the other thing I want to do with Trapjaw and Merman is we're going to do a comparison with the Classics figure that is based on the Filmation look, because I know some people wanted to see specifically a comparison between the heads on these. You can see that this new Trapjaw head on the 5.5 figure is even a little bit bigger than the one that was on the 7-inch scale Classics figure. I actually think I like the colors on the new one a little bit better too. And then we've got Merman, and man, like I was talking about, this is such a huge difference. Vintage Merman is one of my favorite figures. I love that design and that character. This new Merman is awesome though. I mean, he looks really, really great. It's really cool looking at these guys side by side. You can see, again, the sword is inspired by the vintage one, but it is not exactly the same. It's slightly different. It's just really funny looking at these guys side by side and seeing just how different the designs were between the original figure and the cartoon. Again, just for the sake of comparison, we've got him next to the Masters of the Universe Classics Club Filmation version of Merman. So you can see like the size difference. The heads do look different. Actually, the head looks a little bit bigger, I think, on Classics. They're very, very similar in style, but you can see the colors are different. Again, I actually like the more vibrant colors on the 5.5 figure than the Classics figure, but that could totally be up to you, and also interpret which one's a little bit more cartoon accurate. But there you go, looking at them side by side there. So there you go, my friends. There is a look at the latest wave of retro-inspired 5.5-inch Masters of the Universe action figures from Super7. I do believe these are showing up in stock from Super7 now. They are also showing up in stock on various websites. I actually bought mine from BigBadToyStore.com, so there should be some different places that you can pick these up for yourselves. Happy hunting, my friends. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Until next time, my friends.